Why does it say made by Aaron Calvin?
Daily Rambam for Thursday, Chaf Alf Alel Chav Shem Pei, the first Perek of Hilchos Tefilah and Berachos Kohanim. So yesterday we concluded Hilchos Kriya Shema. Now we're moving further to Hilchos Tefilah and Berachos Kohanim. It has 15 prakim, 10 are about davening, 1 is about the Beis Knesset, the show in general, 2 are about Kriyas HaTorah, and the last 2 are in fact about Berachos Kohanim. For comparison's sake, in Shulchan Aruch, there are 39 simanim on Tefilah, 7 on the Siyas Kapayim and the Filas Kapayim and a few other small things like that. 15 about Kriyas HaTorah, 7 about a shul. So these are the halachos we're learning now. Another part of Sefer Ava that's about Tefilah is, of course, at the end of the whole Sefer Ava, we have the whole Seder HaTefilah, the Rambam's Nusach of Davening, which the Rambam decided to copy into the Sefer at the end, though. And now we're going to start Hilchos Tefilah, Perek Aleph. So Hilchos Tefilah, Berachos Kohanim, Yesh B'chlal and Shtei Mitzvahs Aseh. There are 2 mitzvahs here. Achas, number 1, is Lavedus Hashem b'Tefilah b'chol yom, to serve Hashem with prayer every day. And Shnia, the second one, is going to be Levarach Kohanim es Yisrael b'chol yom, that the Kohanim should bless the Jews. Which page?
162.
Should bless the Jews every day. Does not mention a particular location, not necessarily limited to Eretz Yisrael. We shall see when we get to those prakim at the end. And now we're gonna learn these 2 mitzvahs over the course of these prakim. Perek Rishon halacha Aleph. I'm just gonna define the original mitzvah, the mitzvah at its core, midiraisa. What does that mitzvah look like, and how does it compare to how we practice it? That's going to be the first 3 halachas, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Halacha Aleph, mitzvahs aseh lehispalel b'chol yom. So there's a positive commandment, in fact, to pray every day, according to the Rambam. Shenamar va'avadatem es Hashem alekeichem mepi hashmua lamdu shavei dezuhi tefilah. So you're supposed to serve Hashem, and our tradition, our understanding of it is that it's referring to tefilah. Now this pasuk is actually in Parshas Mishpatim, as they're going into Eretz Yisrael, don't bow to their gods. And then it continues. End of the pasuk is pretty famous. So even though the context of the pasuk wouldn't necessarily suggest davening dafka, but we know that it's davening. And V'namar, and then brings the second pasuk, which is in V'hayim Shemaya. Right at the beginning, here it mentions the heart specifically. So what service is there with the heart? Zu Tefilah, that's the famous drasha that's referring to davening. So the Kasef Mishnah explains that what's going on here with the 2 psukim. What's that I'm trying to say? If you want to know, how do I know? Vavadatim is Tefilah. Vavadatim can be anything. It doesn't say how. So you take the other pasuk, there it says lavavchem. So there you learn the idea of avodah shalevi tefilah. So here we see that lavavde always means that. So now it takes us back to this pasuk, meaning vavatem is the tzivui. Lavavde later on the Chesed Mishnah says lavavde lav mitzvahi el sipur devarim. Im shemay tishmu, Hashem will give you mitaratzchem. That's not a copy of mitzvah lavavde b'chol lavavchem. But that pasuk is clear on the lave part. So the combination of the 2 psukim. Mitzvah of Tefilah every day. Ve'ein minyan at Tefilah is minat Torah. So now that I'm come to say though that it's not quite the way we are familiar with the mitzvah. It's very limited compared to how we know it. So he says ve'ein minyan at Tefilah is minat Torah. However, the number of prayers every day is not biblical. Mishneh at Tefilah is minat Torah. Mishneh is an interesting word. It means the nusach, the text. Of the Tefilah is not determined minat Torah. Ve'ein at Tefilah is man kavua minat Torah, and there's no set time either, because the Mishnah says, "Ein la shok v'o bayayim leimar b'shah plainis l'savinu l'spal." There's no set time to say, "Oh, this is the hour that we're supposed to pray." Oh, the hour passed. Oh, every man tefillah. No, kol hashor is ksheros l'tefillah minat Torah. So none of these limitations, and the sentence sort of continues into halacha be'ezu lefichach nashim avadim chayavim b'tefillah. So therefore, women and servants who are usually patur from a lot of things, in this case, are chayav v'vishahi mitzvah saseh shalei azman grama. Yesterday we saw in the beginning of Perek Dalet of Shema that Nashim are patur, and the way the Rebbe explained in the Shulchan Aruch, she'em mitzvah se'el b'zman shchiva b'zman kimetz. It's limited to certain parts of the day. Also, Berachos Kriya Shema, the Rebbe said, because it's part of the Shacharis as we know it. So that's according to the final halacha that there's Zman Tefilah. But over here, when we're talking about the basic chiyuv of Tefilah in general, at its core, Tefilah is a mitzvah shalei azman grama. There's no set time during the day; it's the entire day. It's every day, the entire day. So therefore, nashim are not patur from the core mitzvah of Tefilah. And now the Rambam goes on and sort of explains and restates the chiyuv mitzvah zukachu. So what's the chiyuv? If it's not, if there's no number and there's no text and there's no zman, so what's the mitzvah? So the Rambam says shehei adam mispalo u'mischanim b'chol yom u'magid shivcha shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So first, I think maybe it's shehei adam mispalo u'mischanim b'chol yom. A person should pray to Hashem every day. What does that mean? So u'magid shivcha shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So number one, and there's a seder here. The Rambam is defining it. It's a 3-part seder. Number one, you say Hashem's praise. Then number two, you ask what you need for, and you ask it, you plead for it in a pleading way. And number three, and then you conclude with, again, praising Hashem for all the good He's given you. But that was it. Anyone did it according to his ability. There was nothing beyond that. And he goes on and elaborates a bit more. Shraga, meaning he's someone he's familiar, he's done this a lot, so he's comfortable. So you can elaborate. His daven would have been longer. And if he's someone who's not so good with words, so it's or maybe is referring to both, but according to his ability, and either the second one or both. It's whenever you're able to, whenever you could. That's what you do. And that's the same as for. So we're going through the nusach, the zman, the number. So here, this is about like the nusach. So marbe or makatzer. That's the nusach. The number is also according to your ability. Some prayed once a day, and some would pray many times, according to whatever came up. However, what was already a constant then was that you always prayed towards the mikdash, wherever it was, wherever you are. Now the Kesef Mishnah says, what's b'chomakim shiyeh? It could be one of the two. Either it's referring to the mispalim, that no matter where they were, Aretz, b'chutz la'aretz, they always face the base of mikdash, which is as we do it today. Or it could be referring to the mikdash itself. That since Rambam is talking about the whole history, as he's about to say, this is how it was for the entire period of history from Moshe till Ezra. So we're going into the history here a little bit. So and it's going to continue in a lot of dal. Once you move on to the next step in the development of Tefilah. So because the Mishnah says Neichach HaMikdash could mean throughout that entire part of history, wherever the Mikdash was, whether it was in the Midbar, or it was in Gilgal, or in Shiloh, or in Naiva, in Givon, or when it was finally built in Yerushalayim. So you always have to face wherever, if you're not Yisrael, a bit more of a difference. You have to know exactly which way you're facing. If you're Chutz La'aretz, it probably doesn't matter that much. So that's how the Rambam defines and explains the concept of Tefilah without a nusach, according to whatever you were up to, and without a number, and without the time, however many times you wanted, whenever you wanted. That's how the Rambam explains it. Now, this is not accepted by everyone. This is not so pashut. So let's pause a bit to talk about that. The Kesef Mishnah quotes the Ramban. The Ramban has his hasagas on the Sefer HaMitzvahs. The Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvahs has his list of mitzvahs there as well. And the Ramban has his disagreements of how you count. So he says the Ramban disagrees there, and he says, "Wait, look in Gemara." And the Gemara always says, "It's Tefillas midrabanan." It says, look in the Perek Gimel of Brachas, Bal Kari, which we learned about yesterday. According to Ezra, you can't really daven the Kodesh of Ezra before it was acknowledged that it was in Spatel. So the Gemara says, Bal Kari, he says Kriya Shema, and he benches, and he doesn't daven. And he said, why? Because Kriya Shema, Berachas HaMazon is Deraisa, and the Tefilah is Derabanan. So how's the Rambam going to deal with that? How's he going to explain that? He says, and I saw that, Ramban writes, I saw that he wrote that the Zmani Tefilah are not Minat Torah, but the Chayv is Minat Torah. He says he has another Gam Zayin Nachem Beinai Shbal Kain Mevarach Lamazon Achor Pnei Minat Torah Vein Mispal Ad Sheyitper Afilu Amad Kama Yom Bekar. What if the Bakari is a Bakari for a number of days? It's implied that he can go a few days without. He says also another guy. He says if someone didn't daven Shachris and it comes Mincha time and he's did I daven Shachris? Did I not? I'm not sure. So he says, according to the Rambam, he would have to go daven over again, and they said that b'chol safek b'tefillah she'einu chayzer mispalo b'nei shei midrabanan. The Gemara, you don't. It's always safek in tefillas is l'kul. It's Rabbanan. And he says, "V'meinu mitzvah b'chol yom." If it's not a mitzvah every day, masiti achayv azes mutalas leinu min atayr sheispal yom echad b'shana b'chol yom pa'amacha. So if you say it's every day, so then I have these questions. How does Valkyrie seemingly skip a few days? And why does the guy, why is not Safek Tefilah, Midaraisa? Because he has to daven. Or if you're going to tell me that it's not B'chol Yom, then it's going to be once a year, once in the whole life. It says, it's an asmachta. I guess the Mishnah responds and says that the Rambam holds that it is mitzvah say b'avatem es Hashem, and it's b'chol yom. If it's not b'chol yom, then yeah, you're going to come and say it. Pamachas b'chol yom, but that doesn't make any sense. So if it's a chiyuv to daven to Hashem, then you have to say it's b'chol yom, and just the number isn't minat Torah. And then further on, when the Rambam says no nusach, the Kesef Mishnah adds and explains. So now we can explain these gemaras. The Balkari, when he said he didn't daven, it means he doesn't daven this nusach. By the time the Mishnah Gemara written, we already had the nusach Tefilah. So the Gemara was talking about that. The Gemara said, the Mishnah Gemara said he doesn't daven that, but of course he says a Tefilah Ktsara that you can do. The Zera of Ezra to you have to toivel in order to daven. That doesn't apply to Tefilah Ktsara. It's not a stira. And it says the Gemara didn't have to mention it. It was so pashut that you don't want to be Eiker mitzvah deraisa. According to the Rambam, that's what you're going to have to say. That whenever the Gemara says don't daven, it means don't daven. The Shemana Esrei daven and the same. He uses that same answer for the other questions of the Ramban as well. So that's the big machlekes between the Rambam and the Ramban. Is Tefilah mitzvah same midaraisa b'chol yom or not? If you look in our Sfarim, of course, in Chassidus, the two top mitzvahs are Ava, which we learned about already in Sefer Amada and beginning of Kirishma. Now, other big mitzvah we talk about is Tefilah. So if you look in Derech Mitzvah Secha, you have a whole section in the back, Sheiresh Mitzvah Tefilah, and the Tzemach Tzedek always starts with defining the mitzvah, with the mitzvah that he discusses. So how does he start off Sheiresh Mitzvah Tefilah? He starts off like this. He says, Yesh Machlekes ben HaPesachim mitzvah semi deraisa or midirabanan. So there's this dispute whether it's deraisa or derabanan. Chumei Shehuva b'Sefer Chinuch. He sends it to the Chinuch, who apparently summarizes the situation. He says, but Roiv Meinei mitzvahs, the Smak, the Rashbatz, the Ramban, they say that the Tefilah b'chol yom and the Nusach Tefilah, it's all mitzvah midirabanan. So what's the mitzvah midiraisa? She yispal ha'adam yivakish be'es min ha'itim. Whenever a person comes up, you have an actual request, an eis tzara, that is the mitzvah midiraisa that Hashem said that you should turn to Him and ask from Him. And that's a very important part of the emunah. You always understand that Hashem is running the world. So, and then from there, someone takes it and says, okay, but Zoe, if that's the whole mitzvah, that means that it's not for special people, it's for anyone. Anyone can daven, and that's where, and then that leads him into his discussion of Tefilah according to Chassidus. There's also a letter of the Alter Rebbe that touches on this, part of the controversy, the Chassidish Minyanim, that we're trying to daven with greater passion. So the Alter Rebbe writes in this letter, he says, I don't know who you are, but I heard that you were standing up on behalf of the davening to stand against those who are making fun of the Avodah Shabbat Tefilah. He says, that's how it's supposed to be. He says, now we have this problem that there's a bunch of people. He says, V'hivastam yachad alai ligzer gzera shmad ala Tefilah. There's like a shmad that has been announced, the campaign against Tefilah. Dafka to daven like them, pausing very quickly without a tnuah, without picking up, without raising your voice. At the time of the Alter Rebbe, there was also a bit more of an emphasis on raising your voice, which I guess the Mittel Rebbe maybe took away, but describing that you can't, it can't be like Malachim. Forget, you have to be like Malachim, that they're always making tremendous noise and tenuas. Okay, and then it gets to the point that's relevant to what we're discussing here. He says, but the Malachim, some, maybe some this, some that. Okay, anyway, but he says, so he says apparently some people were tining in response to the Hasidic emphasis on Tefilah. Tefilah is midirabanan. So he says, they never saw light in their life. He says, even though the nusach and the number of 3 is midirabanan, but ikar in yana muhusa hu yisoid kol ha'Torah. But the Tefilah itself is the foundation of the whole Torah, to know Hashem and all of that. And so he goes on at length about that. It's also in Chassidus talks about why, is Tefilah the midrabanan? Why? How does that make sense if it's so important? Which ties into what the Alter Rebbe was talking about. So one of the Mamar, the Marash, he explains like this. He says it's Kriya Shema is hachana to Tefilah. That was part of the question. Why is Kriya Shema hachana to Tefilah? He says Kriya Shema brings you to Ava. Ava still involves you. Yesh Misha Oyev, you're still part of the picture. It's Bli Gvul, but with your own Gvul. He says you ain't Shayach Lemer Shiyave Ruven LeBli Gvul Shel Shimon. You have your Bli Gvul, and Shimon has his Bli Gvul. So it's Bli Gvul within your limitations. He says Tefilah though is Bittul b'Metzias. Tefilah is not Yesh Misha Oyev. It's complete Bittul. So that's why Kriya Shema is a lead up to Tefilah. He says, you also see this in Tefilah, we say, Slach lo novinu kichatanu. Why do we say Slach lo novinu kichatanu? Erst in Shemona Esrei. Maybe we should have started the whole davening with Slach lo novinu kichatanu. Maybe that would make more sense. So he says, no, it's Slach lo novinu kichatanu is representing a recognition, something we recognize in this. Before davening, everyone feels good about themselves. As long as you didn't do an Aveda, but Perek Mamish, and you even did a mitzvah, you thought, oh, I'm very good, I'm Karv Lalikos. Then after Pesukei de Zimra, and everything about you thought about that, Berachas Kriyashma, and then you want to have Ava, and you start thinking, oh, I have real Ava, and then you come to Shemona Esrei, you realize you're still very, very Vaitim Lalikos, and then you say Slach lo novinu kichatanu, lav dafka an actual sin. The Chisar, and I see that my bittul is no good. And that's the Tefilah, and because Tefilah is such a high level, so even the smallest nidnud kal, even the smallest thing, gets in the way. So that's what Kriyashma is leading up to Tefilah. Tefilah is the opposite. It says, why is Kriyashma mid'oraisa and Tefilah mid'rabbanan? Because Tefilah is so high, so therefore it can't be a chayva. Things that are so high can't be an obligation. It's just like Ma'ariv. We say Ma'ariv is a Rishus. We're going to see that in a minute in the Rambam himself. But in the Zayar it says that the Rishus is higher. It's higher than, because it's so high, so it can't be an obligation. It also says Shalosh Shudas, the third Suda of Shabbos, you can eat Peres. Because it's so high, it's the Suda Dativ Kadisha, so it's higher than an actual Suda. So same thing with Tefilah, because it's so high, Iyaf Shalachayah b'mitzvah. Mitzvah is Ratzon Elyon, and Sheish Tefilah is like the whole Klolos Haratz. It's not a specific mitzvah. It's Rabbanan though, they made it a Chiv. Chacham have a special power. They can turn even that into Chiv. What about the Rambam? The Rambam holds that Tefilah is Mid'oraisa, the Maimer says, and he learns it from the Psukim. Kalmaka means Mani Kavut, but even according to the Rambam, it doesn't have a set time. Because Tefilah Shar Shalamayla Mayla Madrega Zman, it's way higher than the concept of time. So that's what he says. It's even though it's Malchus, and Malchus is time, but it's Sherish is Kasser is higher than time. And Chacham were able to bring it down to time. All right, and there's other places that discuss it also. There's a Sikh of the Rebbe, Chokes Daf Shemam Dal. He asked it also as a question and answer. Why does the Tzemach Tzedek only mention the Shita that it's Midrabban? He mentions the Machlekes, and then he just quotes the Shita that it's Midrabban. Why wouldn't the Tzemach Tzedek quote the Rambam that it's Midraisa? Isn't that better? And also you have the Alter Rebbe in that letter saying Leiro Ma'eres Miyameim. He seems to be insulting people who say that Tefilah is Midrabban. So he says, no, the Torah also, this question, the Torah explains that the Shemona Esrei is the Chut HaShedra, it's the spine. It's B'kayim, the whole Ramach mitzvah say. So it's not a mitzvah itself, it's keeping all the mitzvahs in place. So that's what the Tzemach said. That's why the Tzemach said Dafka said it's Midrabanan, because that emphasizes that the explanation of Chassidus, that it's higher than everything. And that's what the Alter Rebbe was saying, that if you say Tefilah is Midrabanan and you're dismissing Tefilah that way, that's terrible. If you say Tefilah is Midrabanan, that's why it's so great, that's fine. Let's look further to see how we got to Tefilah as we know it today. Halacha Dal through Halacha Ches. He starts off with the Nusach. Halacha Dal. Kivin Shegol Yisrael B'mei Nebuchadnezzar Harasha. So once, right, we got up to Ezra, so that got us pretty close to the end of Bayis Rishon, beginning of Bayis Sheni. So they went in Galus Bayis Rishon, Nebuchadnezzar, Nisarvu Paras V'Yovan Ishar Umis. So they started getting mixed in and assimilating a bit in Persia and Greece and the other nations in the area. But Nildal and Banim Ba'artis Hagayim, and they had children that were already born outside of Eretz Yisrael. Those children already, they didn't speak Hebrew properly. They weren't born in their homeland. And everyone's language, spoken language, was a blend of other languages as well. And if he tried speaking, the person wasn't able to express himself and say everything he wanted to say in one language without making mistakes or mixing other things in. Shenamar u'bneihem is the pasuk in Nehemiah. U'bneihem chatzim medaber ashdoidus ve'enim akinu medaber Yehudus u'chulshayin am va'am. So it's describing there that there were Jews even in Eretz Yisrael that half Hebrew, half Ashdoidus, which was Ashdod was part of the Plishtim part of Eretz Yisrael. So that was a different language, and they weren't speaking Yehudus, which is what it calls Hebrew Jewish.
Refers to the town of Ashdod.
Yeah.
It was occupied by. It was occupied by non-Jews.
Yeah, Ashdod was historically not a Jewish city. Yeah, it has like a non-Jewish connotation. So even though the pasuk of there is actually talking about also assimilation, where the mothers weren't even Jewish. If you look in the context of Nehemiah, he was trying to get rid of those wives. But the Rambam takes from there that everybody wasn't speaking Hebrew properly. So the Rambam says, This actually was a problem relating to davening. Shayach me'mispal. So one of them attempted to daven in accordance with this mitzvah. Tiktar l'shoyner l'shal chafatzov or lahagid shavach kadosh baruch hu b'lashon hakodesh al chi'orav imo l'shoynes acheres. So he would find that he doesn't have the words, the language to ask what he needs, or either asking his needs part or the praising Hashem part in Hebrew until he mixed in other languages. That's where Ezra, that's where that timing fits in here. That's when the big change happened. Ezra is based in Salas. That's where the 18 brachas, the Shmeina Esrei, was invented. That's where it came from. The Mishnah quote, the Rambam is putting it in his words. Look in the Gemara, it says, Kuf Chav Skeinim, 120 Skeinim, including a number of Nevi'im. They're the ones who made the Shemina Esrei. That's referring to Anshik Nesach Agdayla. And then in another Perek, in Brachas, it says, Anshik Nesach Agdayla, Tiknu Ham Yisrael, Brachas, Tefilas, Kedushas, V'Havdalas. All these texts of davening are attributed to the Anshik Nesach Agdayla. They're mataken the concept and the language, although obviously to whatever extent the lashon was still slightly fluid for even until the last few hundred years to some extent. So
which period was that?
Which period was what the Takana Ezra?
120 elders.
Yes, that's the Anshik Nesach Agdayla. That's the big assembly in the time of Ezra that stretches.
Or in the 18 brachas, when was that?
So that's what we're saying. Ezra at the beginning of Bayis Shem, the beginning of the second Beis Mikdash. So that's Ezra, the Anshik Nesach Agdayla, the 120, the last Nevi'im. They're all in the mix. They were all responsible here.
Prior to Ezra, they had what you call non-formula kind of.
Yes, that's what he's saying. Yes.
But it was still based on you had the Hilchos and you had all these fun going back to David HaMelech.
He doesn't mention that. It makes it sound like it's up to you. And if you were Ragil, then you spoke well. If you're Else Fasayim, then not. That was very subjective.
Your own.
But he mentions the formula. There had to be a formula of you say the shvach, and then you ask for what you need, and then you give the shvach again. And now he's going to explain how the format of Shemana Esrei fits with that old format from even before pre-Shemana Esrei. Just to point out that the 19th bracha is going to be mentioned in the beginning of Perek Beis. So this is how the Rambam goes on. It's a shalosh rishonos. So the first three, Avis and Mechaya Mesim and Bakel HaKadosh, that's praising Hashem. Shalosh achareinos. So that's let's say Moedim Sim Shalom Haidaya. That's praising Hashem. That's as we described before. That pattern. The Emtzayis, and they're in the middle. Yesh ben She'elas Kol Advarim She'en Kamei Avis L'Chol Chefze Ish V'ish L'Tzerchet Tzibur Konz. That's where you're asking for everything. And he says She'en Kamei Avis. Avis over here in the sense of Kashirish. It sort of includes all the things that anyone would ever need, individual or as a community. Then the brachas in the middle, the 12 brachas in the middle are meant to encompass, that was designed to encompass anything anyone would have to ask. Therefore, you just stick to this text now and you're set. Once we have this great idea here of having these shyness set exactly so, now everyone can master them and be able to learn them quickly and use them. You have to keep in mind that back then everything was Baal Peh, and probably not until the printing press was invented did people really start davening regularly from a siddur. So certainly back in time of Chazal. So the idea being here that maybe you don't know how to speak very well on your own, but at least here's a few paragraphs you can memorize and you'll get it right. And all of a sudden, there's no distinction between someone who can't speak well and someone who could speak well. It's all the same. For this reason, they're attacking all the brachas and all the tefillas. So he might be referring here to mamash everything. Therefore, anytime you make a bracha of any kind, the ileg, the person who can't speak well, he doesn't have to. Your mastery of Hebrew, as long as you're able to read the words and remember them, you're fine. Even if you're not good on your own, coming up with your own stuff. So now moving on to the number and the times. Hey, and then they come up with a number. The number should be like the karbanos. 2 tefillas a day, corresponding to the 2 carbon talmids of Holyam Sheish per carbon musaf. And if it's a day where there's that extra carbon, the carbon musaf, Shabbos, for Shraga, Yom Tov, Tiknu by Tefilah Shlishis, Keneged Kara Musaf. So that's where the third Tefilah, which we actually call Musaf, comes in. Or Tefilah Shakeneged Tamashal Baiker, here Nikras Tefilah Hashachar. So the one that's for the carbon in the morning, that we call Tefilah Hashachar, or we call Shachris now. Or Tefilah Shakeneged Tamashal Bein Harabayim, and the Tefilah that's for the afternoon, here Nikras Tefilah Mincha. Tefilah Shakeneged Musafin, here Nikras Tefilah Musafin, and the one for Musaf is called Musafin. Halacha vav. They also said you should daven one at night. Every tamid shall be narabayim is aklim kol halayla, because there's also, even though there's not a carbon at night, but the limbs of the carbon tamid of the evening, when do they actually burn? When do they actually consume? Throughout the night. Shenamar, it says in Tzav Ya'ila Omeg Tam Mizbeach Kalayla at the baker. That's what's going on the whole night on the Mizbeach. Okay, Shenamar, it says until him Erev Avek of Tzaharayim Masich Ve'ema. So it's three. It's the evening, the morning, and the afternoon. It says Ve'en Tefilas Arvis Chayvek Tefilah Shachas HaMincha. Davening Ma'ariv is not as much of an obligation as it is Shachas HaMincha. V'Alfu B'Kei No Kol Yisrael B'Chol Mekayim Mishmei Yisrael Mispal Arvis. Wherever the minig, everywhere Jews live, is to daven Ma'ariv. Kiblua Alehem Tefilas Chayva, and it's been accepted as a Chayva, so you can't really treat it as a Rishus anymore. Kasef Mishnah says it's actually a Machlekes in Gemara Brachas. Tanoim and Amiroim argue whether it's a Rishus or a Chayva, and the Rif said that Abaye said that the halacha is according to the one who said Chayva. Rava said the halacha is according to the one who said Rishus. The halacha really should be like Rava. However, and the Rif apparently was the first one. According to Gemara, it was just left as a Machlekes. And the Rif says really the halacha should be like Rava. And the Rif said so this is actually a post Gemara development where it became Chayva, and the Rambam does include that it's a Chayva. Halacha Zayin. And then there's an additional tefillah after mincha before shkia, just on a tainus. Today he's about to talk about ne'ilah. Today we're only familiar with it from Yom Kippur, but as the Rambam is stating it here, back then it was a concept relating to every tainus tzibur. As you look at Mesechus Tainus, Mesechus Tainus is about the concept of a tainus tzibur. There's a problem, there's a tzara, let's all go daven. So that all those tainus also had a tefillah ne'ilah. Today we only have it left with Yom Kippur. So they added this tefillah to add this additional request from Hashem, pleading with Hashem, specifically, uniquely relating to this fast. The Rambam says, what is ne'ilah referring to? It's referring to the gates of heaven. In a sense, it's like the heaven is swallowing the sun. The gates of the heaven are closing, and the sun's going away. So we're davening right at that moment. Because you always daven it right as the sun is setting. So that's ne'ilah, the sun's going away. So it turns out that the tefillahs every day are three. On a normal day, you have Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha, and he says it in that order. Interestingly, even though until now he said Shachris first, now all of a sudden he switches and says Ma'ariv first. And the days when you have Musa Shabbos, Yom Tov Rosh Chodesh Arba, you have four Shalosh Shachol Yom, the three regular tefillahs and Musaf, the additional Musaf. Yom Kippurim, Chamesh, and on Yom Kippur you have five. Arba Elu tefillahs ne'ilah. You have these four plus ne'ilah. And there's a whole sikha and the Sichos Cheglam and Hey Bayetze Beis about this idea of the order of davening. He says, if you see Ma'aseh Bereishis, Hayem Hoylech Achar Alayla, He added by Yivoker. The evening comes first. In Kodshim, the day comes first. We said Tamish Shachar, Tamish Bein Harabayim. Rabbi says exactly, and we see that when it comes to davening, sometimes we count from Ma'ariv, sometimes we count from Shachar. So really, you see these two models in davening itself. Is Tefilah a Kodshim thing, or is it a Ma'aseh Bereishis thing? Because Kodshim corresponds to Avodah Shebelev Zu Tefilah. That's what the first thing that I mentioned, that it's you're interacting with Hashem. Then you have the whole Bakashas Tzrachav. You're asking Hashem for what you need. That's more Ma'aseh Bereishis. He says, if you go with Ma'aseh Bereishis, if you go with Bakashas Tzrachav, so then the night comes first. You count Ma'ariv for Ma'ariv first. If you go with the model of Kodshim, that explains how ultimately the main thing is Bakashas Tzrachav, the foundation of davening. Even though, of course, we emphasize the Avodah Shebelev Zu Tefilah, but at its foundation, the main part of Tefilah is Bakashas Tzrachav. That explains it also in a Dir B'Tachtainim kind of way. You're trying to make a Dir B'Tachtainim, not just stop asking for what you want. You're asking because you want to make a Dir B'Tachtainim. So ultimately, for that reason, we emphasize that Arvis, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'aseh Bereishis, that Vayi Erev, the Hayem Hilchos Halayla. Halacha Tes. Last halacha is about Tefilas Nadava, adding your own Tefilah. Tefilas Elu, in Perek man. So as of now, you can't do any less. However, you could add if you'd like. Imra Ta'ad, Mishespal Koyem Kulay, Harashus Biyad. If you want to daven all day, meaning davening over and over and over again, you have permission. But all those prayers you're adding, coming back from the Davis, so those are all like bringing an extra carbon. The two or connected the carbonates you have to bring, and then these tefillahs will be like bringing extra carbonates. So therefore, you should really add in every single middle bracha, the 12, you should add an extra chiddush of your own. You should have the ability with your own language to add something in line with what the bracha is about, the theme of the bracha. If you only did it to one bracha, that's enough. At least that it should be legitimate. That's how you let it. That's how you make it known that this is an extra. However, the middle ones you should add to. Don't add to the three at the beginning, three at the end. Don't add, don't take away, don't change. Leave those alone. The Rabbi disagrees. The Rabbi says, he thinks you can add as many tefillos without being mechadish. That's a whole discussion. He says clearly that lo yanis work. Lo yispal afilu yachid musaf shtayim. Even a yachid can't do an extra musaf, but that's not something you can add. Carbon talmud, it's like a regular oil. You can add another oil. You can add another musaf. And some of the guys who said that you actually shouldn't add a tefillos and dava on Shabbos and Yom Tov at all, because those are days where you can't bring extra karbanos. And the Rabbi has something to say about this here as well. Okay, well, that's enough.